I spent my entire life holding my family together, until I realized I was never meant to belong. Throwaway account because some of my relatives are active on Reddit, and honestly, I'm not ready for this to blow back on me in real life. I've gone back and forth for weeks about posting this, but I need to get it out somewhere, if only to remind myself that I'm not crazy. This is a long one. There's no neat villain, no single explosive moment where everything broke. It was slow, quiet, like watching a house crack from the inside while everyone pretends it's still standing. I'm the oldest child. That detail matters more than I ever realized growing up. In my family, being the oldest didn't mean being protected or guided. It meant being useful. It meant being responsible before I even understood what responsibility was. It meant learning very early that love was conditional, and that conditions could change without warning. For most of my life, I believed my family was normal. Dysfunctional in the way all families are, sure, but solid, loyal. The kind of family that might fight behind closed doors but would show up for each other when it mattered. I was wrong. My parents had me young. By the time I was 10, they had 2 more kids, my younger brother and sister. From the outside, we probably looked like a picture-perfect family. 2 parents, 3 kids, middle-class neighborhood, weekend outings, festival photos proudly posted on Facebook. But inside the house, the hierarchy was clear. My siblings were loved loudly. I was loved quietly, if at all. I was the mature one, the understanding one, the one who didn't need much. When money was tight, I was the one who didn't ask for new clothes. When my parents were exhausted, I was the one who watched my siblings. When my mom cried after fights with my dad, I was the one she leaned on emotionally, like I was her friend, not her child. No one ever asked if I was okay. If I got good grades, it was expected. If I messed up, it was a disappointment. My siblings could fail tests, throw tantrums, make mistakes, and it was brushed off as they're just kids. I was a kid too. No one seemed to notice. By the time I was in high school, I was basically a third parent. I packed lunches, helped with homework, handled school calls when my parents were busy. Teachers praised my responsibility. Relatives called me so mature for my age. What they didn't see was how tired I was, how lonely. Still, I stayed loyal, because that's what family does. At least, that's what I believed. The first crack appeared when I was 18. I had worked my ass off to get into a good college. Scholarships covered most of it, but not all. I sat my parents down, nervous but hopeful, and explained the remaining costs. I wasn't asking for luxury, just help. My father sighed and said, "We'll see." A week later, they bought my brother a brand new gaming laptop. No discussion, no hesitation. When I brought it up, my mom snapped, "Don't be selfish. You know your brother needs motivation." That word, selfish, stuck with me. I took on part-time jobs, then 2. I went to college exhausted, constantly worried about money, while still sending some of what I earned back home when things were tight. And they were always tight. As adults, my siblings and I drifted into predictable roles. My brother became the golden child, charismatic, charming, always forgiven. My sister became the baby, emotional, fragile, constantly protected. I became the fixer. Whenever something went wrong, my phone rang. "Can you talk to your father? He won't listen to me." "Your sister is upset. She feels ignored." "Your brother made a mistake, but don't judge him." I mediated fights I didn't start. I absorbed blame I didn't deserve. I swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. And for years, I told myself it was worth it. Because family. Things finally began to unravel the year my grandmother fell ill. She was my mother's mother, the only person in my family who truly saw me. She noticed when I was quiet. She asked about my dreams. She once told me, "You carry too much for someone so young." When she got sick, I was the one who took time off work to take her to appointments. I stayed overnight at the hospital. I coordinated with doctors. My siblings visited when it was convenient. When my grandmother passed, she left behind a modest inheritance. Nothing extravagant, but enough to matter. That's when the vultures came out. My parents decided, without discussion, that the inheritance should be redistributed fairly. By fairly, they meant mostly to my siblings. Their reasoning: my brother needed help starting a business. My sister was emotionally sensitive and needed security. I was independent and would manage. I remember sitting at the dining table, hands clenched under the surface, listening to this like it was perfectly logical. For the first time in my life, I said no. I said, that was Grandma's money. She wanted it split equally. The room went silent. My father looked at me like I had slapped him. My mother's eyes hardened. Why are you being difficult? Difficult. Not greedy, not unfair. Difficult. That was the moment I realized something fundamental. I wasn't family to them in the same way my siblings were. I was a resource. After that conversation, things shifted. Subtle at first. Short replies, passive-aggressive comments, invitations that slipped their minds, group chats where decisions were made without me. When I confronted my sister, she cried and said I was attacking her during a vulnerable time. When I confronted my brother, he laughed and said, "You always make everything so serious." When I confronted my parents, they accused me of breaking the family unity. I was stunned. For years, I had held that unity together, and the moment I asked for fairness, I became the problem. At the time, I thought this was the worst of it. I thought the inheritance fight was the peak of the drama. I had no idea that behind my back, my family was already rewriting my role in their story. I didn't know they were planning something that would force me to choose between self-respect and the family I had spent my entire life protecting. And I definitely didn't know that the next time we all sat down together, everything would finally explode. After the inheritance argument, I tried to convince myself that things would cool down. Families fight, right? People say hurtful things, then move on. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I should just give them space. So I did. I stopped calling as often, I stopped jumping in to solve problems that weren't mine. I focused on my job, my own apartment, my own life, something I had never fully done before. And that's when I noticed something unsettling. My absence didn't make them miss me. It made them angry. It started with small comments from extended relatives. An aunt casually said to me at a family gathering, "You know, your mother is very hurt. She says you've changed, you've become distant, selfish." Selfish, again. I laughed it off at the time, but inside, something twisted. Then a cousin messaged me out of nowhere. "Is everything okay at home? I heard there's tension because of money issues." I hadn't told anyone about the inheritance dispute, not a single person. That's when it hit me. They were talking about me, a lot, and not kindly. I later found out how carefully the narrative had been crafted. According to them, I was obsessed with money, I was jealous of my siblings, I had forgotten my roots, I thought I was better than the family because I lived independently. It was surreal, like watching strangers describe a version of me I didn't recognize. And the most painful part? People believed them, because I had always been quiet, always accommodating, always the one who didn't complain. So when they finally spoke for me, no one questioned it. A month later, my parents asked me to come over. "We need to talk as a family," my mother said. Her tone was calm, almost gentle. That should have been my first warning. When I arrived, everyone was already there. My brother, my sister, even my uncle. They were seated like this was some kind of intervention. I stood near the door, suddenly very aware of how outnumbered I was. My father cleared his throat. "We're concerned about you." Concerned. They took turns speaking, like they had rehearsed. My mother said I had become cold and distant. My sister said she felt emotionally unsafe around me. My brother said I was creating negativity and tearing the family apart. I listened, quietly, the way I always had. Then my uncle looked at me and said, "Sometimes the eldest child feels entitled. You should reflect on that." That's when something inside me cracked. I asked, very calmly, "Is this about the inheritance?" Then my mother said, "It's not about money, it's about your attitude." I realized then that this meeting wasn't about resolving anything. It was about discipline, about putting me back in my place. I tried to explain my side. I talked about years of responsibility, of being overlooked, of feeling used. They didn't interrupt me. They let me speak. And then they dismantled every word. My mother said, "We never asked you to sacrifice so much." My father said, "You exaggerate your struggles." My sister said, crying, "You make everything about yourself." My brother said, smirking, "You're too sensitive." By the end of it, I felt dizzy, like maybe I was imagining things, like maybe I had created a story in my head where I was the victim. That's the power of people who know you deeply and choose to use that knowledge against you. I left that house apologizing. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. After that meeting, the emotional distance turned into something sharper. My parents stopped checking in, my siblings stopped replying unless they needed something. And then the requests started again, subtle at first. My brother needed help covering a temporary expense. My sister needed support because she was overwhelmed. My parents hinted that they were struggling financially. I noticed something chilling. They were still happy to take from me, they just didn't respect me anymore. When I hesitated to help, the guilt trips came fast. After everything we've done for you, family helps each other without keeping score. You've really changed. Each time, I felt myself shrinking. What they didn't expect is that I had changed, but not in the way they thought. For the first time in my life, I started talking to a therapist. Saying things out loud, hearing them reflected back, was like turning on a light in a dark room. She said, "You were parentified. You were emotionally neglected. You were conditioned to equate love with usefulness." I remember sitting there stunned. There were words for my life, and none of them meant I was crazy. She asked me a question that haunted me for weeks. What happens if you stop performing your role? I was about to find out. The opportunity came sooner than expected. My parents called one evening asking for a significant amount of money. Not a loan, not temporary help, just money. I took a deep breath and said, "I can't do that." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then my mother said quietly, "So this is who you are now?" My father followed with, "Don't forget where you came from." I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I simply repeated, "I can't." And for the first time, I hung up without apologizing. They didn't take it well. Within days, relatives stopped inviting me to events. A cousin unfriended me. An aunt posted vague quotes on Facebook about ungrateful children. Unstable. I had spent my life being their emotional anchor. Now I was a liability. I wish I could say that was the worst of it. But the real betrayal, the one that made everything irreversible, was still coming. It involved a decision made behind my back, a decision that directly affected my future, a decision that proved beyond any doubt that my family did not see me as one of them, and when I confronted them about it, there was no pretending left, only truth, and it was ugly.
I found out by accident. That's the part that still stings the most. Not just what they did, but how casually my life was altered without anyone bothering to tell me. It was a random phone call from my father's lawyer. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a mistake. It wasn't. He asked me to confirm some details related to the property transfer. I laughed nervously and said, "I think you have the wrong number." He didn't. Growing up, there was always one constant assurance in my family. No matter what happens, my parents used to say, "This house will belong to you kids equally." That house wasn't just property, it was emotional currency. It was where I grew up, where I slept on the floor during arguments so my siblings could have the bed, where I studied late nights, where I became who I was. When my grandmother was alive, she reinforced it constantly. "This house is your security," she'd tell me. "One day it will be yours too." So when the lawyer explained, very professionally, that the house was being transferred entirely into my brother's name, my brain simply stopped. "What?" I asked. He hesitated. "You weren't informed?" No, I wasn't. I drove to my parents' house that night. I didn't call ahead. I didn't warn them. I walked in shaking, heart pounding, adrenaline carrying me forward. They were all there again, my parents, my brother, my sister, like they had expected me. My brother wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked one question. Why didn't anyone tell me? My mother answered first. "We didn't think it was necessary." Necessary. My father said, "You live independently. This house is for the child who will stay and take responsibility." I laughed then, a sharp, broken sound. "I took responsibility my entire life," I said. "You just never called it that when it was me." My sister crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." That word again. Something snapped in me. I stopped trying to be calm. I stopped trying to be reasonable. I asked questions I had never dared to ask before. Why was I always the one expected to adjust? Why did my needs come last? Why was I excluded from decisions that affect me? And finally, do you even see me as your child? No one answered. That silence was my answer. Then my mother said something that rewired my entire understanding of my family. "You were always strong," she said. "You didn't need us the way the others did." There it was. Not love, not fairness, just convenience. My strength had disqualified me from care. My brother finally looked up. You left. You chose your own life. This house is compensation for what I stayed and endured. I stared at him in disbelief. You stayed because you were protected, I said. I left because I had to survive. He shrugged. In that moment, I realized something devastating. He didn't think he was stealing from me. He thought he deserved it. My father then delivered the final blow. If you contest this, he said calmly, we'll cut you completely. No relationship, no inheritance, no family. I waited for the fear to come. It didn't. Instead, something else settled in, cold, clear, final. I saw the pattern. Compliance had always been the price of belonging, and I was done paying. I stood up. I won't fight you, I said, but I won't pretend this is okay. My mother's face twisted. So you're choosing money over family? I looked at her and said quietly, you chose comfort over your child a long time ago. No one followed me when I left. The weeks that followed were brutal. They told everyone I had abandoned the family, that I was greedy, that I had mental health issues. Some relatives believed them, some didn't. Most stayed silent. I lost people I thought were permanent. But something unexpected happened too. I slept better. I stopped flinching when my phone rang. I stopped feeling responsible for emotions that weren't mine. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. I thought the story ended there. I thought walking away was the final chapter. I was wrong. Because months later, something happened that none of us expected. Something that forced my family to face the consequences of the choices they made. And suddenly, they needed me again.
I hadn't spoken to my family in nearly 8 months. 8 quiet, heavy months where I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I changed my number. I blocked relatives who only reached out to lecture me about family values. I focused on work, therapy, and learning how to exist without constantly apologizing for taking up space. For the first time, my life felt stable. That's usually when karma decides to knock. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something made me answer. It was my sister. She sounded nothing like herself. Her voice was shaky, rushed. I didn't know who else to call. I didn't speak. She took that as permission to continue. Our father had suffered a stroke. Not fatal, but serious. He'd lost partial mobility. Medical bills were piling up. My mother was overwhelmed. My brother, the newly crowned owner of the house, was suddenly very busy and very unavailable. And just like that, the family system collapsed. Within days, messages started coming in from every direction. An aunt, at the end of the day, he's still your father. A cousin, this is not the time for ego. My mother, finally, we need you. Not we miss you, not we're sorry, we need you. The words didn't hurt the way they used to. They clarified everything. Against my therapist's advice, but for my own closure, I went to see them. The house felt different, smaller, heavier. The walls held tension instead of comfort. My father looked frail. My mother looked exhausted. My sister was barely holding it together. My brother? He wasn't there. He said he has responsibilities, my mother said quietly. I almost laughed. We sat at the same dining table where I'd once been dismantled piece by piece. This time, no one led the conversation. I did. I told them calmly that I was sorry my father was ill, that I hoped he recovered, that I wished them well. And then I said the words they weren't ready to hear. I won't be stepping back into my old role. My mother broke down. So you're punishing us? I shook my head. I'm protecting myself. My sister whispered, but you're the strong one. I looked at her and said, that strength almost destroyed me. That's when something incredible happened. My father spoke. Barely above a whisper, he said, we thought you'd always be there. Not we were wrong, not we hurt you, just entitlement. I replied, I was, until I learned that love shouldn't require self-erasure. Silence filled the room. For once, no one argued. Later that night, my brother finally called. He didn't ask how our father was doing. He asked if I could help financially. I said no. He exploded, accused me of abandoning family, of being heartless, of holding grudges. I let him talk. Then I said, you got the house. You wanted responsibility? This is what it looks like. He hung up on me, and I felt nothing. I didn't cut them off completely. I checked in occasionally. I helped in ways that didn't cost me my sanity. I kept boundaries firm and visible. And something strange happened. They stopped demanding, because for the first time, they realized I could leave and stay gone. Here's the part people don't warn you about when you stop being the family scapegoat. You grieve, not just the people, but the idea of them, the parents you hoped they'd become, the siblings you protected in your imagination, not in reality. But you also grow. You stop begging to be chosen. You stop shrinking to fit broken systems. You stop confusing endurance with love. I have a quieter life now, not easier, but honest. I have friends who don't need me to disappear to feel secure. I have peace that doesn't depend on approval. I have boundaries that feel like oxygen. And my family? They still tell a version of the story where I'm the villain. I've stopped correcting them, because the people who matter can see the truth. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself, if you're the strong one, the responsible one, the understanding one, please hear this. You are not difficult for asking to be treated fairly. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. And you are not obligated to bleed just because others are comfortable that way. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for your family is walk away. Subscribe for more real story. Thanks for watching.